Hello. What is rewilding to me? Rewilding is a spectrum. For me, I see it as a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, you have someone that may not be participating in any behavior that would be associated with rewilding. If that is someone that is consuming McDonald's as their daily food, or something of a similar nature, that would be on this far end of the spectrum up here. Then you have somebody that may be living in the woods, off the grid, 100% sustaining themselves. That's on this end of the spectrum. For me, it was always about just working towards this. I started eating a very typical diet of an American. Fruit Loops and, McDonald's and all of the typical things. I just, bean burritos warmed up in the microwave were definitely a big favorite of mine growing up. But there was a point whenever I was about 18 or so, I started becoming conscious about what I'm consuming. I first started with a uneducated way of approaching a vegetarian diet. I gave that up after about a year, and then for a few years I fell into eating healthier and not, and back and forth, until eventually, 4 or 5 years ago, I decided that I was actually going to put some serious effort into getting healthier. I've seen people around me, not 21-year-olds, 30-year-olds, it didn't matter, my parents, 50-year-olds, everyone was getting ill quicker than I figured they should have. And it put me on the path of rewilding. So at first, that started with gathering some spring water. It made sense that 60+% of our body is made up of fluids, and those fluids are made up of what we consume as fluids, and it made sense to make sure that those are made of the highest quality thing I could get my hands on. Luckily, I traveled about an hour north of where I lived in Indiana to gather spring water. I'd gather about 40 gallons at a time. I'd bring it back and try to store it in a cool place. But that's how I kind of began my rewilding journey, was with water and food. But I took water very serious. Then it became a process of eliminating the poorest foods from my diet, and then the next poorest food from my diet, until I was consuming primarily organic foods. And then meat has always been a big thing for me. And then I began hunting deer. And so venison is it is my most consumed meat. And I feel really good about where that comes from, of course, being I harvested it myself, or maybe it was gifted to me by a fellow hunter. But that spectrum, I began here, and only at that time, even with years of practicing eating well and gathering water and beginning my hunting, I was nowhere near this fellow that was self-sustaining, living out in the woods, off the grid. Not that I even necessarily want to get there. But rewilding is that spectrum of that trajectory that you're heading on. It's nothing solid. If it was solid, it'd be really easy to define. But it's a changing thing. For you, it might be just choosing to not eat out a couple times a week. It might be choosing to get out in the woods a little more often. But rewilding can be whatever you want it to be. I would say as long as you're heading in a direction that is favorable to nature. Favorable to nature would be something that is sustainable. So you don't want to be doing, well, ultimately maybe you don't want to be doing more harm than you are good. Walking through the woods, you're going to be causing havoc, of course, on the microcosm, on the small plant life and insects as you step and tromp around. But you want to eliminate that footprint as much as you can. I would say if there's something kind of solid about rewilding, it's that ultimately that you're living in harmony with nature, not that you are dominating nature. Rewilding for me has also been, aside from the food aspect that I was describing there, it was a movement spectrum. It began with a quite solitary life, playing video games oftentimes, eating that microwave burrito, just rushing to the microwave to warm it up and make something just quick enough that I can get right back to what I was already doing. But the movement, again, beginning with couch sitting, now has become something where I enjoy finding some logs out in the woods to balance myself on, jumping creeks, climbing trees, and also a big avenue for me has been martial arts. I practice Tai Chi Chuan, and I found a lot of relation between the principles found in Tai Chi and the principles needed to move safely, efficiently through a wooded landscape. So you always want to, something like, simple as being rooted. You want to make sure you have a firm grasp of the ground. If you're balancing on a tree limb, you definitely want to make sure you have a firm grasp on there. You want to make sure you can balance yourself well. So there's some simple aspects like that. But Tai Chi ends up being a philosophy of movement, of natural movement. Maybe I'll speak on a different video a little bit more about the philosophies there. But no better place to express natural movement than out here in the woods. But if you're inside of a home and you don't have access to woods, maybe find yourself maybe for this example, a martial arts class locally that you want to take. Something that's going to get you a connection with your body, connecting with your body. I think that was ultimately a symptom of eating well. After eating well, I found myself more conscious of how my body felt. And that meant I figured that I needed to do things to then support my body. Whether that be some little weight training or martial arts or balancing practice or, it goes on forever, of course. But the cool thing about the spectrum, again, is that as long as you're heading towards that trajectory that you've painted, whatever that picture may be of that ultimate goal, and understand that you may never reach that goal, but it's a good time trying to get there for sure. As long as you're on that path, you're doing better for the world. You're doing better for yourself. You're doing better for everyone around you. yeah, that's rewilding for me. Let me know what rewilding is for you. I'm curious what rewilding will be for me in a year from now. But something that has stayed solid is that idea of a spectrum. That, I'm heading somewhere, and as long as I'm taking a few steps each year, if I want to be more disciplined each week, each month, then I'm rewilding. Talk soon.